So the other day I was doing a little research on, of all things, tire pressure again. Everybody's talking about tire pressure. And re-researched some of the stuff that I had read before about what's the correct tire pressure or your optimal tire pressure based on your weight and the size tire that you have and where you're going to ride and all that stuff. And you know, nothing new there. We bikers, we road bikers, regardless of the level of skill that you have or how long you've been riding, sooner or later your tire pressure setting comes into play, and you begin to ask questions like, is this too soft, is this too hard, and all that sort of thing. But came across this one line of thinking and this one thought. Again, I got the bug in my throat. Came across this one article, and essentially it's kind of backed up by something I also saw recently on GCN, that your tire pressure should be set in such a way that the tire's actual dimension is reduced by 15%, or it's 15% of something or other, which becomes an impossible dimension to measure, if you will, because you have to be sitting on the bike and try to take a measure before and after. Yeah, that's what it was. So if you're off the bike, you're supposed to measure your diameter of your bike, of your tire. And then you're supposed to sit on your bike and then measure the diameter of your tire, and it's supposed to be 15% less. I think that's the way it goes, but it's impossible to measure. I mean, it's so small, it's impossible to measure. For me, the revelation is that if you take a look for what size tire pressure you should be running based on your weight and your tire size, you'll find charts with graphs on it that says, okay, if you follow this line in the chart and you find your tire pressure and your weight, where they intersect is a point that'll tell you what your PSI is. And I've been using that myself. And based on that, those charts, I've been setting my PSI right around 90, 95. But I also came across another chart recently, and they said, oh, wait a minute, you have more weight on your back tire than your front tire, and based on this formula for having your tire changed by 15% in its dimension, some guy came up with a different chart. So actually, the chart is for the weight on each wheel. So they're saying, okay, for your back wheel, which is probably about 55% of the weight of your total bike is on the back wheel, 55% of it is, then take that value and use it on the chart to determine your PSI and tire pressure. So anyway, I used that chart and found out that I should probably be somewhere quite a bit less than 95 PSI. Something like 75 or 80 PSI. And I thought, well, that seems a little dangerous. Doesn't that seem low? And so I thought twice about following the information on that chart to set my PSI. But I also remembered a while back, last summer I came down or ran into a flat tire situation, repaired the tire, but I was having a devil of the time getting my tire pump back up with my little hand pump. And finally got it to a point where I figured, okay, that's as good as I'm going to get it, let's go. And I know the PSI was nowhere near the 95 that I typically was running. And I found no problem running us off the PSI in terms of safety and bike handling and all that sort of thing. So anyway, I gave this chart a second look and decided, okay, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to change my front and back PSI based on this chart to those dimensions And instead of running the 95 on both, I'm going to go down to 80 in the front and 80 in the back. Now, why not more PSI in the back? Because it has more weight. Well, as it turns out, I've got a bigger tire in the back. I have a 28 mil in the back and a 25 in the front, only because the carbon fiber fork that I put on the front of my bike a while back does not accommodate a 28. So, long story short, I've got my PSI down from 85 to 90. The bike runs smoother, more comfortably, and a road that I typically ride down, a hill that I typically ride down and gets recorded on Strava and on an app called Relive, shows that I ran down that hill almost 3 miles an hour faster with the bike with lower tire pressure. Surprised the hell out of me. Now, I'm not saying everyone should do this, and I'm not saying that I'm going to stick with it, but I did find it interesting that the PSI that I had been running seemed to me to be way too much. And I just thought I'd pass that information along to you guys. So take it for what it's worth. If you want to jump all over me and tell me that I'm going to kill myself running that low PSI and that my tires are going to come off the rim, I understand that's a possibility, but I doubt that it's going to happen at 80 or 85 PSI compared to 95. Anyway, that's what I'm talking about. Wow, what a day. What a beautiful day here in Guilford, Connecticut. Canadian geese. Very cool. Okay, heading home.